Have you ever wondered how your grandparents stayed warm without a thermostat? Back in the 50s and 60s, families survived brutal winters with nothing but ingenuity. Today we're exploring 25 forgotten winter survival secrets that still work. Do you remember when winter wasn't just a season, but a genuine test of endurance? Back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there were no smart thermostats, no heated car seats, and no high-tech fabrics designed in a laboratory. When the temperature dropped and the wind started howling, you relied on what your parents and grandparents taught you. And you know what? Those lessons worked. Today, we're exploring 25 forgotten winter survival secrets from our grandparents' era that still work just as well now as they did back then. Let's start with layering clothing. Your grandmother didn't just tell you to put on a coat. She told you to put on an undershirt, then a flannel shirt, then a sweater, and then your coat. It wasn't just fussiness, it was genuine wisdom. The secret behind layering is that each thin layer traps a pocket of air between it and the next one, and that trapped air acts as insulation. One thick coat might feel heavy and warm in the store, but it can't compete with 3 or 4 thinner layers working together. Back in the day, kids would head out to school looking like little round snowmen because their mothers had piled on so many layers. But those kids stayed warm, even waiting at the bus stop in below-zero wind chills. The military figured this out too, adopting layering systems for soldiers in Korea and later in other cold weather operations. Your grandma didn't need a military study to know it worked, though. She'd learned it from her mother, who learned it from hers. Wool socks. There's a reason every family had a drawer full of thick wool socks come wintertime. In the 1960s, a good pair of wool socks from the Sears catalog cost about 89 cents, which is roughly $8.50 today. Families would buy them by the dozen, and for good reason. Wool has this remarkable property that no other common fabric could match for decades. Its unique fiber structure retains about 80% of its insulating ability even when it's soaking wet. Think about that. Cotton socks get damp from sweat or snow, and suddenly your feet are freezing. Wool socks get wet, and they keep right on keeping you warm. Farmers, loggers, mail carriers, anyone who worked outside in the winter swore by wool. Kids who spent hours building snow forts and sledding down hills came home with wet feet, but not frozen ones, and that made all the difference. Thermal underwear. If you grew up in a cold weather state, chances are you owned at least one set of long johns. Thermal underwear was as essential to winter as a snow shovel. Brands like Duofold, which was founded all the way back in 1906, became household staples. Their famous 2-layer construction combined cotton on the inside with wool on the outside, creating a garment that was warm without being impossibly bulky. You could find them in the Sears catalog or at any general store, and every family had a set for each member of the household. Kids wore them under their school clothes. Dads wore them under their work clothes. They weren't glamorous, but they were the foundation that made everything else you wore on top actually effective. That thin layer against your skin made a bigger difference than most people realized. Staying dry. This was the cardinal rule, the one piece of advice grandparents drilled into every child before they stepped foot outside. Stay dry. It didn't matter how many layers you had on or how expensive your coat was. If you got wet, you got cold. And you got cold fast. Damp clothing loses its insulating properties almost immediately, especially cotton. That's why grandparents were so insistent about waterproof boots, about coming inside to change if you fell in the snow, about never going back out in wet gloves. They understood something fundamental about survival. Moisture is the enemy of warmth. Do you remember your mother insisting you put on another layer before heading out? She knew something science later confirmed. Keeping dry was the single most important thing you could do to stay safe in winter weather. Now that we've covered what to wear, let's move inside the house and talk about how our grandparents kept their homes warm with nothing more than fire, iron, and common sense. Cast iron stoves. Now here's something that anyone who grew up in a farmhouse or a rural home will remember instantly. That big, heavy cast iron stove sitting in the living room or the parlor, glowing with heat on a freezing January night. Cast iron stoves weren't just heaters. They were the beating heart of the home during winter. And the secret behind them was simple physics. Cast iron has incredible thermal mass, which means it absorbs heat while the fire is burning, and then slowly releases that warmth back into the room for hours after the last log has turned to embers. We're talking 4 to 6 hours of radiant heat with no fire going at all. Think about that. You could load up the stove before bed, and it would still be warm when you woke up in the morning. Families in rural Vermont, upstate New York, and all across New England relied on these stoves well into the 1970s. Some never gave them up at all. If you remember the classic Fisher Grandpa Bear stove, introduced in the 70s, that beast could heat a 2,000 square foot home on just 2 loads of wood per day. Back in the 1950s, roughly 30% of American homes still depended primarily on wood or coal stoves for heat. A cord of firewood cost about $10 in 1960, which is roughly $100 today, and a single cord could keep a family warm for several weeks. That was real efficiency, and it didn't require a single kilowatt of electricity. Before we move on, I'd like to ask a small favor. If you're enjoying this trip down memory lane, a like and a subscribe truly helps us continue making these videos for you. We really appreciate it. Fireplace maintenance. Now, a lot of folks had fireplaces, but here's the thing our grandparents understood that many people today have forgotten. A fireplace is only as good as the care you put into it. Back in the day, chimney sweeping wasn't optional. It was a seasonal ritual. Creosote, that dark terry buildup inside the chimney, was a serious fire hazard, and families knew that a dirty chimney could burn the whole house down. Professional chimney sweeps would come through town, but plenty of folks handled it themselves with weighted brushes and a lot of elbow grease. Beyond cleaning, our grandparents knew how to manage the damper, that metal plate inside the flue that controls airflow. Close it too much and you'd smoke out the room. Open it too wide and all your heat would fly straight up the chimney. They also understood wood selection. Seasoned hardwood like oak or hickory burned hotter and longer than softwoods like pine. A well-maintained fireplace with properly seasoned wood and good damper control could genuinely heat an entire house. It was a skill, almost an art form, and it's largely been lost now that most fireplaces are decorative. Wood stoves. If the cast iron parlor stove was the king of heating, the wood stove in the kitchen was the queen of multitasking. This was the dual-purpose marvel that heated your home while you cooked dinner right on top of it. Families across Appalachia, the Midwest, and really anywhere in rural America depended on these stoves for everything. You'd have a pot of stew simmering on one side, a kettle of water heating for tea on the other, and the whole kitchen would be the warmest room in the house. Grandma didn't need a separate furnace and a separate oven. She had one appliance that did both jobs beautifully. On the coldest mornings, the whole family would gather in the kitchen because that's where the wood stove was already fired up for breakfast. It was practical, it was communal, and it created some of the warmest memories of winter in every sense of the word. Which of these do you remember most, the cast iron stove or the wood stove? Share your warmest winter memory in the comments. Candle power. This one might surprise you, but a single candle produces roughly 80 watts of heat. Now that doesn't sound like much, but in a small enclosed room it makes a real difference. During power outages, our grandparents knew to gather the family into one small room, close the door, and light a few candles. The combined body heat plus the warmth from those candles could keep a bedroom surprisingly comfortable even when the temperature outside was well below zero. Candles were a staple in every household, not just for light, but as a genuine emergency heat source. People kept boxes of them in the pantry the way we keep flashlight batteries today. It was simple, it was cheap, and when the power went out during an ice storm, those little flames were a lifeline. With the fire burning and the stove radiating warmth, our grandparents turned their attention to keeping that heat inside, and they had some brilliantly simple tricks for insulating their homes. Insulating windows. Now here's something that just about every farmhouse in the northern states had in common. When winter hit, the first thing folks did was pull out the heavy curtains. We're not talking about those thin, decorative drapes you see in homes today. These were thick, quilted curtains, sometimes lined with wool, or even old blankets sewn right into the fabric. Grandma didn't hang those things because they looked pretty. She hung them because they worked. A single layer of heavy curtain over a window could reduce heat loss by about 10%. But most families didn't stop there. They'd double up, hanging a blanket behind the curtain, and that brought the heat savings closer to 25%. No fancy technology, no double pane glass, just fabric and common sense keeping the cold on the other side of the wall. In farmhouses across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the Dakotas, you'd see every window in the house covered up tight by November. Those curtains stayed shut until spring. Old newspapers as insulation. If heavy curtains were the first line of defense, newspapers were the secret weapon. Back in the 1940s and 50s, old newspapers were the duct tape of winter survival. Families saved every single edition, not for the articles, but for the insulation. They'd stuff crumpled newspaper between storm windows and primary windows to create a dead air space that blocked the cold. They'd tape sheets of newspaper right over window cracks where drafts crept in. They'd wrap newspaper around exposed water pipes to keep them from freezing overnight. And here's one that a lot of folks remember. If your boots were wet and cold, you'd stuff them with wadded up newspaper before bed. By morning, the paper had absorbed the moisture and your boots were dry and ready to go. Some families even packed newspaper into the walls of older homes where insulation had settled or never existed in the first place. It cost nothing, it was available everywhere, and it genuinely worked. Did your family stuff newspapers in the window cracks or hang extra blankets? I bet more of you remember this than you'd expect. Blanket fort strategy. Now this one might sound like child's play, but it was actually a serious survival technique. On the coldest nights, especially if the fire was dying down or fuel was running low, families would gather in one room and create a small enclosed space using blankets, quilts, and whatever furniture was handy. The idea was simple. Instead of trying to heat an entire house, you concentrated all the body heat from your family into one tight area. A couple of adults and a few kids huddled together under a canopy of heavy quilts could keep that little pocket of air surprisingly warm. It's actually the same principle behind how igloos work. You trap body heat in a small insulated space, and the temperature inside stays comfortable even when it's brutal outside. During particularly harsh winters in rural areas where wood supplies ran thin, this wasn't a game. It was how families made it through the night. Snow as insulation. This one surprises a lot of people, but snow is actually one of nature's best insulators. It's roughly 90 to 95% trapped air, and all those tiny air pockets make it incredibly effective at holding temperature steady. Folks in cold climates learned this early on. They'd bank snow right up against the foundation of the house, sometimes piling it 2 or 3 feet high around the base. That snow acted like a blanket for the home's foundation, keeping the bitter wind from stealing heat through the lowest part of the structure. At just 1 foot deep, a snowbank maintains a steady 32 degrees on its inside surface, even when the air temperature outside drops to -20. Farmers also used snow to insulate root cellars, packing it around the doors and walls to keep stored vegetables from freezing solid. Flannel sheets, and then there were flannel sheets. If you grew up with flannel on your bed, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That brushed cotton surface trapped a thin layer of warm air right against your skin the moment you climbed in. Regular cotton sheets felt like sliding into an ice bath on a January night. But flannel felt warm almost immediately. Families bought flannel sheets in the fall and didn't switch back to cotton until May. It was one of those small comforts that made a freezing night feel bearable. Once the home was sealed up tight, the next challenge was keeping everyone warm through the long night, and that's where some of the most cherished bedtime rituals came in. Hot water bottles. Now here's something that just about every family had tucked away in a closet or hanging on a hook in the bathroom: the hot water bottle. These simple rubber bottles became popular in the early 1900s when rubber manufacturing finally made them affordable for everyday families. You'd fill one up with boiling water from the kettle, screw that stopper on tight, wrap it in a towel or a flannel cover, and slide it right down to the foot of your bed before you climbed in. On a freezing January night, slipping your feet against that warm rubber was pure heaven. By the 1950s, brands like Faultless were selling millions of these things every single year at around $1.50 each. That's about $16 in today's money. A quality rubber hot water bottle could hold its heat for up to 8 hours. You'd fill it up at 9 o'clock at night, and it would still be warm when you woke up at 5 in the morning to start your chores. Some families had one for every member of the household. Kids would race to get theirs filled first. Mothers would tuck them into cradles for the babies. And if you were feeling under the weather, that hot water bottle would end up pressed against your stomach or your lower back, soothing aches and pains better than just about anything else. Handmade mittens and scarves. How many of you had a grandmother who knitted your winter mittens? Those were worth more than any store-bought pair, and I mean that literally. There was something about pulling on a pair of mittens that your grandmother made with her own 2 hands, sitting in her favorite chair by the fireplace with those knitting needles clicking away. But beyond the sentimental value, those handmade woolens actually performed better than anything you could buy at the department store. When grandmother knitted mittens using worsted weight wool yarn, she created a fabric that was roughly twice as dense as machine-knitted alternatives. Her tighter stitches and double-layered construction trapped significantly more warm air between the fibers. She'd often knit them with a double layer at the palm and fingertips where you needed the most protection. And the scarves were the same way: long, thick, wrapped around your neck 2 or 3 times with the ends tucked into your coat. Those weren't fashion accessories. They were survival gear made with love. Many grandmothers would start knitting in September, working through the fall evening so every grandchild had a fresh pair by the first snowfall. Rubber boots and overalls. If you grew up on a farm or in a rural area, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. Rubber boots and heavy-duty overalls were the essential armor for anyone who had to work outside in the dead of winter. Farmers, ranchers, loggers, and anyone with livestock to tend would pull on those tall rubber boots every single morning before stepping out into the snow and sleet. The key was keeping dry, because wet feet in freezing temperatures could lead to frostbite in a hurry. Those boots went up past the calf, and you'd tuck your pant legs right down inside them. The overalls, often made of heavy canvas or duck cloth, covered you from chest to ankle and took the brunt of the wind and wet, so your clothes underneath stayed dry. It wasn't glamorous, but it was absolutely effective. Whiskey for warming. Now this one's a little controversial, but we'd be leaving out an honest piece of history if we didn't mention it. A small nip of whiskey before bed on a bitter cold night was a tradition in many households. Grandpa would pour just a small measure, and that warmth would spread through your chest almost immediately. What's actually happening is vasodilation, where the alcohol causes your blood vessels to expand, sending warm blood closer to your skin. It genuinely feels like you're warming up from the inside. But here's the thing our grandparents understood. They knew whiskey was a complement to real warmth, not a replacement for it. You'd have your hot water bottle, your flannel sheets, your wool blankets all in place first. The whiskey was just the finishing touch. Staying warm was one thing, but our grandparents also knew that what you ate and drank played a huge role in fighting off the winter cold from the inside out. Eating hearty meals. Now here's something our grandparents understood on a deep, almost instinctive level. When the temperature drops, your body needs fuel, and not just any fuel. It needs the kind of heavy, stick-to-your-ribs meals that could keep your internal furnace burning for hours. Think about those thick beef stews simmering on the back of a wood stove all day long, or a big pot of chicken and dumpling soup, or a hearty casserole loaded with potatoes, root vegetables, and whatever meat was available. These weren't just comfort foods, they were survival foods. A typical winter stew could pack anywhere from 800 to 1,200 calories in a single serving, and that was by design. Your body burns an enormous amount of energy just trying to stay warm in freezing temperatures, so those calories weren't wasted. They were converted directly into body heat. Grandma didn't need a nutritionist to tell her that. She just knew that when the snow was piling up outside, you needed a bowl of something hot and heavy to keep going. Dried herbs for warmth. And speaking of warming up from the inside, our grandparents had another trick that's been backed up by modern science. Dried herbs like ginger and cinnamon weren't just for flavor. They were used specifically to create warmth in the body. A cup of strong ginger tea on a freezing morning was practically medicine in many households. Researchers have since confirmed that ginger actually increases thermogenesis, which is a fancy word for heat production inside your body. It stimulates your metabolism and gets your blood circulating, which makes you feel genuinely warmer. Grandmothers knew this intuitively long before any scientist put it in a journal. Cinnamon worked in a similar way, and families would blend these warming spices into teas, hot cider, oatmeal, and baked goods throughout the winter months. Essential oils for cold relief. Now, when winter colds and chest congestion hit, and they always did, our grandparents reached for essential oils like eucalyptus and peppermint. This wasn't some trendy wellness fad. This practice dates all the way back to the 1800s. They'd rub eucalyptus oil on their chests or add a few drops to a pot of boiling water and lean over it with a towel draped over their head, breathing in that powerful steam. It opened up the sinuses, soothed sore muscles, and helped clear congestion without a single trip to the pharmacy. Peppermint oil was another favorite, especially for headaches, and that general achiness that comes with being cold and run down for weeks on end. Staying active. Here's one that might seem obvious, but it made a bigger difference than you'd think. Our grandparents didn't sit around during winter. They couldn't afford to. There was wood to chop, laundry to do by hand, floors to scrub, animals to feed, and 100 other chores that kept them moving from sunup to sundown. All that physical activity wasn't just productive, it was a survival strategy. A working farm family in winter could easily burn 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day just through daily labor. That constant movement kept blood flowing and body temperatures up, even in poorly heated homes. Storing winter food. But none of those hearty meals would have been possible without months of preparation beforehand. Canning and preserving food was one of the most critical winter survival skills our grandparents possessed. A typical 1950s farm wife might can between 500 and 800 quarts of food each fall. Vegetables, fruits, meats, jams, and preserves would line the cellar shelves like a private grocery store. The Ball Corporation was selling over 100 million mason jars per year during the mid-20th century, and that tells you just how widespread this practice was. Root cellars kept potatoes, carrots, turnips, and apples fresh for months in cool, dark conditions. Without all that preparation, winter could mean genuine hunger. ice fishing. And in the northern states, there was one more way to put fresh food on the table during the coldest months. Ice fishing was a deeply practical tradition that provided fresh protein when almost nothing else was available. By the 1960s, states like Minnesota had over 2 million participants heading out onto frozen lakes each winter. It wasn't just about catching fish, though. It kept people active, engaged, and connected to their communities during those long, isolating months when cabin fever could really set in. Among all 25 of these winter secrets, which one surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Our grandparents had the food, the fire, and the clothing figured out, but they also had one more category of survival knowledge: what to do when things went really wrong. Emergency shelter from old materials. Now, here's where things get serious, because everything we've talked about so far assumes you're safe inside your home. But what happened when you weren't? What happened when your car slid off the road in a blizzard, or you got caught out in the woods when a storm rolled in faster than expected? That's when the real survival knowledge kicked in, and our grandparents had it in spades. They knew how to build an emergency shelter out of practically nothing. An old tarp, a heavy wool blanket, a couple of large overcoats, even the rubber floor mats from your car could be fashioned into something that would keep you alive until help arrived or the storm passed. The most common design was the lean-to, and it was beautifully simple. You'd find a fallen tree, a large rock, or even the side of your stalled vehicle, and you'd drape your material at an angle against it, securing the edges with rocks or snow. That basic lean-to design could reduce your wind exposure by up to 80%, and that alone could be the difference between life and death in a winter storm. If you had time and materials, you'd insulate the inside with pine boughs, dried leaves, or even crumpled newspaper from the car. A properly built lean-to with decent insulation could raise the interior temperature 15 to 20 degrees above the outside air. That doesn't sound like much until you realize that 20 degrees is the difference between dangerous hypothermia and making it through the night. People didn't learn this from books. Fathers taught sons, mothers taught daughters, and every kid in rural America knew the basics of emergency shelter by the time they were 10 or 12 years old. Birch bark for fire starting. And once you had your shelter, the next priority was fire. Without fire, even the best shelter was just a cold box. And this is where one of the oldest winter survival secrets in North America comes into play: birch bark. If you've ever peeled a strip of bark from a white birch tree, you know it has this papery, almost waxy feel to it. That's because birch bark contains a natural compound called betulin, and betulin is essentially waterproof and highly flammable. That combination makes birch bark one of the most reliable natural fire starters on the planet. A piece of birch bark about the size of a playing card can sustain a flame for 3 to 5 minutes. That's more than enough time to ignite even stubborn, wet kindling that wouldn't catch any other way. Native Americans had been using birch bark to start fires for centuries before they taught the technique to European settlers, and that knowledge was passed down through generations of American families. In the northern states and across Canada, carrying a few strips of birch bark in your coat pocket was as common as carrying matches. Some folks would gather it in the fall and keep a supply in their truck, their barn, and by the back door all winter long. That waxy betulin meant the bark would light even after being exposed to snow or rain. Our grandparents understood something fundamental about winter survival. You needed to know your environment. You needed to know which trees gave you fuel, which direction the wind was blowing, and where to find natural wind breaks. They understood body positioning, how to curl up to conserve heat, how to keep your back to the wind, and why you never went out to work alone in dangerous cold. The buddy system wasn't just for school children, it was a survival rule for anyone working outdoors in winter. Did anyone in your family teach you how to start a fire with birch bark or build a quick shelter? That knowledge was once considered essential for every child. The thing that really stands out about all of this is the mindset behind it. Our grandparents didn't treat winter survival skills as some kind of specialty hobby or weekend adventure course. They taught these things to their children as naturally as they taught them reading and writing. By the time a kid was old enough to walk to school alone, they knew how to find shelter, start a fire, and stay warm in an emergency. It created an entire generation of people who were prepared for anything winter could throw at them. And that self-reliance wasn't just practical. It was a source of deep personal pride. From emergency skills to everyday wisdom, these 25 secrets paint a complete picture of a generation that didn't just survive winter, they mastered it. Now, when you step back and look at all 25 of these secrets together, something really powerful emerges. These weren't just random tips that Grandma and Grandpa picked up along the way. They were a complete survival system. Think about it. Clothing, shelter, food, fire, and emergency preparedness. Every single base was covered, and each piece worked together with the others. The layering kept you warm while you chopped the wood that fed the cast iron stove that heated the home, where flannel sheets and hot water bottles kept you cozy at night. The hearty stews gave you energy to stay active, and staying active kept your body temperature up. It was all connected, like a web of practical wisdom that had been refined over generations. And here's what really drives this home. In February of 2021, a massive winter storm hit Texas, and over 4.5 million homes lost power. Some families went days without electricity or heat in freezing temperatures. It was a crisis that caught millions of people completely off guard. But you know who fared better during that storm? The folks who knew the old ways, families who understood how to layer clothing properly, who knew how to use a fireplace safely and efficiently, who thought to hang heavy blankets over their windows and huddle together in one small room to conserve body heat. Those people got through it. They weren't comfortable, but they survived, and they kept their families safe. Meanwhile, people who had relied entirely on modern heating systems and had never once thought about what happens when the power goes out found themselves in real danger. In the months after that Texas freeze, sales of cast iron wood stoves surged by 300%. Hot water bottle sales spiked on Amazon. People were suddenly scrambling to learn the very same skills that their grandparents had known by heart. It was a stark and sobering reminder that Grandma's wisdom wasn't quaint or outdated. It was essential. And that's really the deeper lesson here, isn't it? This knowledge was never just about staying warm. It was about something bigger. It was about self-reliance and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can take care of yourself and your family no matter what. It was about community too, neighbors checking on each other, sharing firewood, bringing over a pot of hot soup when someone was struggling. And it was about family bonds, sitting together by the fire, knitting mittens side by side, teaching your kids how to start a fire with birch bark or how to can vegetables for the long winter ahead. Those moments weren't just practical, they were meaningful. These aren't just memories worth holding on to, they're skills worth passing on. Have you taught any of these to your children or grandchildren? Because the truth is, every generation thinks they've moved beyond the old ways until the lights go out and the temperature drops, and suddenly that knowledge becomes the most valuable thing in the world. As we close out this journey through 25 winter survival secrets, let's take a moment to appreciate the generation that knew how to handle whatever winter threw at them. And there you have it, 25 winter survival secrets that our grandparents carried with them through some of the coldest, hardest months imaginable. When you step back and look at everything we've covered today, it's really remarkable how complete this knowledge was. We talked about 4 different clothing techniques, from layering to wool socks, to thermal underwear, to handmade mittens and scarves. We explored 4 different ways to heat a home using fire and cast iron and wood stoves, and even simple candles. We went through 5 clever tricks for trapping heat, from flannel sheets to heavy curtains to newspaper insulation to blanket forts to using snow itself as a natural barrier against the cold. We covered personal comfort rituals like hot water bottles and rubber boots and staying dry and warming up with herbs like ginger and cinnamon. We talked about 6 different food and activity strategies, everything from hearty stews to ice fishing to canning and preserving to simply staying active around the house. And we touched on emergency preparedness skills like building shelters from old materials and using birch bark to start a fire in the worst conditions. That's not just a list of tips. That's a complete survival manual, and it was all hidden right there in our family memories. Our grandparents didn't learn this from YouTube videos or survival blogs. They learned it from necessity, from experience, from watching their own parents and grandparents do whatever it took to make it through another winter. And the beautiful thing is, every single one of these secrets still works today. Not a single one has expired. The wool still insulates. The cast iron still holds heat. The stew still warms you from the inside out. I think there's something really special about keeping this wisdom alive, not just for nostalgia's sake, but because it genuinely matters. These are skills worth passing down to our children and grandchildren. Now I'd love to hear from you. What winter survival tricks did your family use when you were growing up? Drop those memories in the comments because I know there are even more secrets out there that deserve to be remembered. Thanks for joining us on this trip down memory lane. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and share it with a friend who remembers these winter traditions. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another journey into the past.